Hi, I'm Dean Obeidallah. Welcome to Salon TV. It's election day. Everybody knows that. People are out at the polls or hope you're going to get out of the polls. Democrats really excited. Great chance to take the House back. Senate, much tougher lift, but maybe the underreported story are the governorships across the nation, where I think Democrats might pick up 5 to even 9 or 10 governorships today.
And I'm Amanda Marcotte. Republicans may have started on the message of the economy and taxes at the beginning of the election cycle, but they've really fallen in line with President Trump and his racially divisive message and nationalist agenda. Will that be enough to carry them over the finish line going into 2019? So, Dean.
It is I can't believe it's the day. I call this Judgment Day. I've been counting it down daily on Twitter. Daily reminder, come out and vote. Election Day is Judgment Day, and I mean that sincerely. I think this is so much bigger than any election of my life.
I mean, do you feel like this is about almost morality at this point?
Survival. I think it's about, as a minority, I'm Muslim. We have a president who openly demonized Muslims to win office, which was supported by 65% of GOP primary voters. The idea of banning anyone who's Muslim from coming to the soil. And ultimately that would have meant making us leave at some point. That's what I really meant. So this was really something about, I cannot believe this man was elected to the White House. I think, though, this for people who did not think he could win, including my friends who were Bernie supporters like I was, but didn't come around to Hillary, and said to me, well, what did it matter? Hillary's going to win. We know that. This is their chance to come out and vote and make it clear that they reject Donald Trump's vision of this country. And I think on some level, it's never been a more stark vision, like what Trump is about, really is about emboldening white supremacy, encouraging political violence, demonizing women who come forward, to the contrast of Democrats. And right now, which is really inclusive, tolerant, compassion, and this is the day. It's Judgment Day. It's never been more clear. It's not about fighting over more regulations or lower taxes, higher taxes. This is about who we are as a nation today.
Yeah, I almost feel like because of the way that the news cycle has sort of moved so fast these days, we've almost forgotten that just last week there were multiple domestic terrorist attacks against minorities, against black people, against Jews, and I'm worried that if Republicans win, or even if they do better than expected, they're going to take that as a sign that they should just double down on this stuff, and we're going to see more murder, we're going to see more terrorism. I'm terrified.
Well, I mean, to be honest, when you look at the ad that Trump used as part of his closing argument, that racist ad about the undocumented immigrant who was Mexican who killed 2 police officers, people compared that to Willie Horton ad, which on some level I hope it reminded people the Republicans have been using racism for decades. And, look back at George Bush the father and go oh, the kinder, gentler Republican used one of the most racist ads of our day. So when this ad came up with Trump, I'm glad it reminded people that Republicans have been playing this race card for decades and decades and decades. I'm fearful. We've seen a quantifiable spike in anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-black hate crimes, anti-LGBT hate crimes as well over the last 2 years. And it's not a coincidence. It's under Donald Trump. When you talk about political violence like he does, and you talk about bigotry and open racism and open demonization of, say, a minority faith, it emboldens everyone who shares views of that a certain group does not belong in this country. We might take it to the next step and actually personally attack them. So I'm concerned. But win or lose, they're going to use racism again. They're going to use bigotry again. It's what they do. You dance with the one that brung you. That's what brought them to where they are.
So I had a piece that went up last night on Salon, and it was about whether or not this is an election that's also a referendum on whether liberals really understand the power of voting. And when I put it on social media, I still had people ostensibly of the left, I don't know how many of them were Russian bots, saying, no, it's organizing, it's protesting, as if those two things were in opposition. And I'm
right.
It starts with voting, and then it goes into all those other things, but you can't get anything done without voting. Do you feel that people are getting that message?
Let me put it this way. If you don't get now with what we're seeing, that you should vote and that your vote's important and it can change the course of the country, there's nothing I can say or I can write, I think, to change your view on that. Because we've never had a person in the White House who has openly demonized minority faiths, who's trying to ban transgender Americans from being in the military, who has demonized woman after woman who came forward to say they've been abused sexually or physically, and standing with the men, from Rob Porter's aide, which we all forget, and I wish the media would talk about when he defended Rob Porter, who beat up his two ex-wives, and we even saw Colby Holderness, one of them with a black eye, to standing with Roy Moore, standing with Bill O'Reilly. The list goes on. If you don't care about these other communities, I don't even know if you're a progressive, to be frank, because to me, progressive is defined by being compassionate and caring about people that you don't know and you may never meet, but you don't care. You're going to still fight for them. If you're not going to check in, you're not going to vote now, I don't know how you're a progressive. I don't know what you are. You know, anarchist or a tourist or a poser, hipster, whatever you want to say. Those who care, you have to vote this election, and then 2019 and 2020, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think is really kind of interesting, because I think people in the mainstream media are finally beginning to talk about the fact that the Republican voting bloc is actively voting to protect white supremacy. And they see voting as the primary way to do that, and they're not wrong. You know, maybe it's just inherent.
But you touch on something else too about violence. And in our history of our country, when white supremacy is threatened, violence is what they use to keep in power. We saw that from after slavery through Jim Crow, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and you see it now. Now, you see it lesser today than you did during the time of the Civil Rights Movement, obviously, and I hope we don't get back to that violence. But when white supremacy is threatened, it goes to violence, because to them, it's everything they're about. And, you know, I love this term they had. Remember, it was economic anxiety, then studies came out and saw that it was loss of status was the new way of saying white supremacy, where the group in dominance was fearing losing their dominance. And study after study showed that's really what the Trump base was about. That's white supremacy. And for them, they get upset because they're not burning a cross on someone's lawn. They go, well, I'm not a white supremacist. You really are. It's about wanting to keep a white power structure and viewing it as a zero-sum game. So when there's brown people and there's Muslims and there's black people moving in, and you feel threatened, and that's why Trump went with the caravan. Even though even Republicans like, go with the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it was a mistake when you look back? You think if Trump went with the economy as a closing message for 2 weeks, instead of immigration, scare the crap out of my base, do a racist ad, send up 15,000 troops to the border type of thing, do you think it made a difference for, and this whole election, it's always about moms, some moms, but the suburban moms are the big vote here. Do you think it makes a difference?
Maybe. I mean, what's so funny is I feel like Trump's approval ratings are only as high as they are in no small part because the economy is good. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are checked out of politics that aren't really paying attention. They don't necessarily like Donald Trump. They see him as a clown, though. They don't really see him as a threat. Yeah. And, you know,
I would call those people white people.
Of course.
Because if you're a minority, you view them as a real threat. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, though. It's the thing you were saying about how it's always been this way. So I grew up in the border of Texas and Mexico, and it's always been a sense, I suppose, racially mixed. It's two groups of people, but that's it. And I always heard white people talking about the vote as like in racially loaded terms. Like wow. There was always this kind of hysteria about people of color voting. I just grew up hearing that. And, you know, I'm not trying to like call any people in my life out. Well, I am. So, you know, you're called out. But, you know, I think that it doesn't, in a sense, this doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't surprise me to see the voting suppression tactics on the border. It doesn't surprise me to see the border being treated as this like hot zone to like scare white people. It's just sort of a thing that I grew up with becoming the national problem.
That's interesting, because I grew up in North Jersey, where it was primarily white. I grew up in a town where you either were Italian or my father, because my dad's Arab, and everyone else was Italian, so I'm half Italian, half Arab. But there was not these overt conversations. If it was much more hushed about the idea of voting based on race or voting based on racism. And I'm sure there was, don't get me wrong. But I love Jersey, where I'm from, because it's a much more visceral progressivism as opposed to intellectual. I'm not saying they're not intellectual in Jersey, but it's much more like, hey, you don't bother me, we don't bother you, just live your life type of thing. Like, why are you bothering these people? That's my Jersey accent, by the way. And so, but, you know, getting back, though, to the economy, I wondered this, that Trump knows his base better than anyone. Mm-hmm. And if he's going out there to his base, in his own mind, he made a calculation. If I talk about the economy, because he said it was boring, I don't think that's the truth. He loves the economy. He tweets about it, has press conferences when the GDP numbers were up. I don't think his base is doing that much better, if at all better, in the last 2 years. No. And, you know, he talks about this great economy. Unemployment's down about 8, 9 points over the last 10 years, only about a point under Trump. and wage growth is only 0.8% when you factor in inflation. It doesn't even count the 30% gas prices. And when you look at the labor participation rate, which is simply people 16 and over who are working in America, he came in, it was 62.9%. So the economy is going great. You'd think it went up to 64, 65. It's exactly at 62.9%, meaning the same people on the sidelines before are still on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm thinking, what do you think, that he didn't go with the economy because he knows his base and it's not going to work for his base?
I think that's right. I mean, his base is economically better off than Clinton's base was. Like, Clinton voters weren't as economically well off as Trump voters. It's such a weird myth that I just can't with it. And they were doing well under Obama. They're doing well under Trump. The economy is its own kind of engine that is somewhat slow to respond to political change. I think it's such a weird myth in American politics that the economy somehow is always the driver of the vote. Like, people are doing well, they were open to these racialized messages. And yes, Trump voters said they were doing bad under Obama, and they said they're doing well under Trump. That's because they are perceiving the economy through their racialized lens. And I mean, I've seen it myself. I've seen Republican voters I know whose life has not changed at all suddenly act like they're doing better because they just think that they are. And it's very, and so yeah, I think he's not wrong. I think he's actually got an almost native talent for these sort of things.
That's what I think. When I saw some people in the media saying, why are you talking about the economy? You're double guessing Donald Trump's understanding of his base, which he has an attachment, a connection to them that I've not seen. I mean, it's maybe Beto O'Rourke. But in a good way.
Well, the question then is, a lot of talk in the media about the base. They're not the majority of Americans.
No.
And so my question is his base-oriented strategy going to work? What do you think is like making people afraid of immigrants, afraid of black people? There's been a weird amount of anti-Semitism, which you never see.
Yep.
Is that going to work, or is that going to actually cause a backlash?
Well, I think for many you are seeing this sense of this is wrong, this vision of America, these values are not what I believe this country's about. And that's why I think we're seeing young people, according to early voting, coming out in much bigger numbers than in 2014. So that's the question, like how much you're ginning up your base, but how much you're ginning up the other side to go like, I hate that, what you're talking about. We're going to come out and vote against that very thing. I think Donald Trump, I think there's a chance tonight he makes the Democratic Party great again in a very inadvertent way, that because we could win the House, there's a small chance the Senate. Like if you could, we don't have to go through it right now, but there is a path.
I mean,
but the
Beto has a 1 in 5 chance, basically.
I know if you look at the 538. Okay, but still, everyone I've talked to Texas, and you're from Texas, I've talked to countless people from Texas, like there are Beto signs and energy we've never seen in the Republican areas. And Ted Cruz is not likable. That also helps.
Yeah.
So it makes it better. But look, if we win a bunch of governorships, right now we have 16 governorships. This is horrific. 16. This is a terrible place we are. We're going to win 4, definitely, by the polls right now. So, and there's a bunch in play from Georgia. That's not counting Florida, not counting Georgia. It's not counting Ohio, which I think we could win. You go through the list of Kansas is in play. Wisconsin, we could beat Scott Walker over there.
He's definitely scared.
He is. And, Tony Evers over there is neck and neck, up a little bit. You really have a potential to win 7, 8 governorships, which is so important for various reasons. From, in many states, expanding Medicaid right away, so hundreds of thousands of people in those states will actually see a change in their life for the better, to the more hardcore political thing. We have a governor there when we're doing redistricting and designing the map in a nice, fun gerrymandering way that as progressives we can go along with the idea of destroying democracy as long as it helps us, which I think gerrymandering is wrong completely. And I think we should have commissions, and it's on the ballot in some places, that have commissions have just nonpartisan decide the districts. And I think that's the way it should be. In any event, we have a shot though, and this is because of Trump, because the economy, it's an Obama economy, he inherited it, is doing pretty well according to the polls. People feel good about it. It's Trump. That's the guy on the ballot.
I think one of the reasons you're feeling so much anxiety on the left right now, despite all these like obvious polls that show things going well.
Right.
First of all, they're not all that great. Like the Republicans still have a significant chance of doing well tonight. But I think the other thing that's causing a lot of anxiety is like we also felt that in 2016, and it is true. Hillary Clinton got almost 3 million more votes. She only lost because there was a sudden surge of voters that nobody expected, sort of like and it wasn't a huge number, but they were enough to tip over Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, places like that.
Right.
Those people are still there, and the only question remaining is like, I think there is a lot of anxiety that we're going to see these people come out of the woodwork again, and they're going to vote their like racial resentments again, and we're going to see somebody like Andrew Gillum in Florida lose suddenly, even though he's like 5 points up in the polls.
It's definitely possible, but if we come out, we win. There's more of us, and you know, people say, well, how do you know that? You just made a great point. We won by 3 million votes in 2016, but Trump gets the ultimate participation trophy, comes in second, and he gets to be president. No other country could do that. Like in everything else in America, you run for dog catcher, you got to come in first. But in any event, we have electoral college. That's the way it is. But since 1992, Democrats have won the popular vote every time but once, and that was in 2004.
In the presidential election.
Right, presidential election, I meant.
Yeah.
If we come out, there's more of us, and there's more now. I'm oddly more confident today than I was in 2016. I was blindly confident in 2016. I just, like everyone else, assumed Hillary was going to win. I didn't even think about it. There was not even a discussion. What if Trump wins? Like, what are you, drunk? Get out of here. But now I know there's a chance we could lose. But when we see the people lining up to vote and the surge in voters, in voter registration, in states like Texas, I don't think all of a sudden 1 million older people are like, you know, I finally should vote. I think it's younger people, people who are first-time citizens, people who are going to tend to be Democrats are registering. And I could be wrong. We're going to find out tonight.
They don't have as much room to play in getting new voters like the Republicans don't. They just straight up don't. Like one of the downsides, very few downsides of how their voters vote every election, no matter what, is that there's not a lot of room to grow there, and they're kind of dying off. But I do want to talk about how the Republicans are reacting to these facts, which is their massive voter suppression. And in fact, I saw this morning that El Paso, where I grew up, the Border Patrol is having crowd control exercises on the border, which I think to a lot of people doesn't sound like much. But in El Paso, the city goes right up on the border. There's a huge, very dense neighborhood right there, and mostly Hispanic, and they're going to see all these cops out there. I mean, they're doing stuff like this. Georgia, places like that. They're scaring people out of voting. They are literally stopping people from voting. How much of an effect do you think that's going to have?
It's going to have an impact. I can't quantify. I don't want anyone who's watching to think about voting and they haven't voted yet to say, like, I don't know if my vote's going to matter. I'm going to be there intimidated. Look, voter intimidation is a federal crime. And if you go to a polling place, you have the right to vote. And they say you're not registered for any reason, asked to speak to a manager, a supervisor in reality. And you can call like 866-OUR-VOTE, O-U-R vote. You can call a DOJ hotline, but I think Jeff Sessions answers now and ask what race you are and then hangs up on you. But you can do, but you have the right to vote. At the very least, you get a provisional ballot. But look, it's going to have an impact. I just think that we know they're doing that. And I'm hoping more of us come out to overcome that. And I've never seen more energy. I've never seen more people talk about this as the most important election of their life. I was in Greensboro, North Carolina last Monday for a town hall for Tom Steyer. And a woman who was 72 stood up and said, my name is Carol, I'm 72. This is the most important election of my life, of my children's life, of my grandchildren's life, of my great-grandchildren's life. And she didn't say it in a rah-rah way. She said it in a somber way, sort of understanding the gravity of where we are. And I was moved by it, and so was everyone. And she got a big round of applause. But many people, I feel it. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, to me, is the most important election of our life, that our nation's soul is on the line, and where we go as a nation right now. This is going to be a big part of it tonight, the results.
Yeah, so I kind of also want to talk about some of the larger social things that are sort of the fact of the matter is Trump isn't going away, even if Democrats have rack up huge wins tonight. Republicans are still going to control a lot of state houses. Yeah. If Democrats do well, Trump has already been sort of seeding the idea that they cheated to win, which is absolutely not true. The cheaters are on the right. It's really obvious. Like, Brian Kemp is massively cheating.
Absolutely.
You know, so he's already setting it up. What are you, I mean, are you...
Am I worried? I'm worried he's going to try to dissolve the legislature. I mean, he's going to do
Yeah.
something like like I always say, don't think like a normal person who covers politics.
He's going to try to delegitimize this win immediately.
Do something.
That's the first thing he's going to do.
You have to think outside of the box, like not out of the box, like out of the, like, you have to think like, you saw Silence of the Lambs, like we need a political Hannibal Lecter to talk to explain to us what Trump might do, because you can't, I'm not even kidding, like.
What will the worst person do?
What would an authoritarian leader do? What would Sisi or Erdogan, what would someone in Saudi Arabia, what would the prince do? The idea of literally, like I've been in Jordan, where they dissolved the legislature, where the king could do that. Trump can't really do that because we have a constitution, but he can do everything close to that, which is delegitimize the Democrats. I think the Democrats in the House, they take control, become his #1 enemy, more than anything else. And then it's his excuse for the economy, if it slows down, Democrats. You know, you don't have a job, Democrats. Whatever my legislation to get through, Democrats. That's when I think you're going to see that. But what do you think, though, the Democrats are going to make their top priorities getting in? And you think Nancy Pelosi becomes automatically the speaker, or do you think there's a little internal Democratic caucus fight?
Here's my prediction of what's going to happen for Nancy Pelosi. For the first time, and I think I can remember, people are on the campaign trail. There's always been like more conservative Democrats who say they're not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as a leader in a leadership role to sort of appeal to their swing districts. Right. I've never seen people come at her from the left before. What's going to happen, I predict this right now, is if they win, she's going to run for speakership. The people that are going to go against her are going to be a bunch of 40-year-old white guys to her right. And she's going to win because everyone on the left that said they weren't going to vote for her is going to have to, and it will be fine. Pelosi's office is already quietly making moves to start like massive investigations into Donald Trump the second she gavels the like caucus in, like, and that's good. That's a good use of the power that they're going to have, because they're not going to be able to pass any legislation. They are going to hit the Senate and Trump firewall. Sure. And even if we win the Senate, Trump is a firewall. So they should be focused 100% on getting the truth about Russia, getting the truth about emoluments, getting the truth about all the other sleazy, corrupt crap that Trump is up to. That needs to be priority #1. My only fear is that they're going to be worried about being too Trump focused.
So you're saying they should actually do their job mandated by the U.S. Constitution, as opposed to the Republicans have been doing. Like, so they're actually going to show up for work, because I think Republicans should not have gotten paid for the last 2 years. It's like, it's worse than part-time job. They should have lost their health benefits. Here's the other thing. I talked to Congressman Ro Khanna last night. I interviewed him, and he is a Democrat from California. And he said, and he's vice chair of the Progressive Caucus, he said, we are going to vote on legislation. We are going to force the Republicans to vote on Medicare for all. We're going to force them to vote on climate change. We're going to force them to vote on raising the minimum wage.
And I know they have an ethics bill that they're going to do day one.
So they're going to set the agenda. So part of it is going to be what you said, but part of it I think is really going to be addressing substantive legislation, because to me, Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker or not, that's really the caucus's choice. I just want them to choose whoever they think is going to be the best to get us ready for 2020. If that's Nancy Pelosi, so be it. I think she's worked really hard, raised a lot of money, and been there for years and years.
Yeah.
But I think whatever they do, their metric should be simply this: will what we're doing now give more enthusiasm to our base, or dampen our enthusiasm of our base for 2020? And anything that's going to dampen it, they should not do, because they can't pass the legislation ultimately.
Yeah.
So do the things that keep us going, because soon, like tomorrow, literally, the 2020 race for Democratic president begins much more in earnest. And those Democratic candidates are going to set the tone for the Democrats, whoever that might be. Yeah. It's begun already, but tomorrow it really, it starts.
I mean, my dream is that the Democrats win the House and the Senate, and the first thing they do is make Trump veto an ethics bill.
I wonder if Americans, I know we care about it, I wonder if other Americans care about that, but I hope they really go at the issues that affect people's lives. Health care for all, so important. Raising the minimum wage would help. We had no wage growth. This is a great way to do it.
And that is actually kind of how the Democrats think about things. They're like, oh, bills that like actually address people's needs, that's probably what they will do. But I think an ethics bill is more interesting, because that also gets to it. It's like one of the reasons we can't do all this other stuff is because of the corruption in D.C.
That's absolutely, and Trump has been the leader in chief. And we might get a Mueller report, Robert Mueller report. Rumors, it could happen tomorrow. I don't know about tomorrow, but you could see it in the near future, and that could change our entire discussion of what's going on, because then impeachment gets forced to the front burner, if Robert Mueller were to recommend articles of impeachment, like Kenneth Starr did, and that's released to, it will be released if Democrats have control of the House. We'll know what it says, and then that becomes the focus. Because if he recommends articles of impeachment, I think the House has an obligation to hold hearings. I don't know if they're going to vote to impeach, but they have an obligation to hold hearings, and that would become a spectacle in among itself, and I think an important one, frankly.
I think a lot of people are believing that's going to happen a lot faster than it is, and the one reason I think it won't necessarily is because there's a lot of evidence that Mueller's actually subpoenaed Trump and that they're quietly
Trying to do something?
Trying to stop him from having to testify in front of the grand jury, and he's going to hold up the investigation until that happens.
Well, all I know is for Ken Starr, 30 days after they deposed Bill Clinton, that's when the report came out. So it's obviously clearly near the end, although I think Roger Stone might get indicted any day. I could be wrong about that. I think it's winding down. I think Mueller is coming. But, I mean, it's election day. Let's wrap up. Do you have what's your closing argument? Trump's been racism. Do you have a closing argument to progressives out there who, any few have not voted yet, which would be stunning, but if, for someone that's sitting around, or an argument they can share with their friends or family members, who are like, it doesn't matter if I vote. What would be yours, Amanda?
There's no path to victory that's not through voting. Again, you can organize, you can protest, you can do whatever the hell you want, and I think you should do those things. Please do those things. But if you don't vote for Democrats, you're screwed, because they are the only people that will listen to protesters. They're the only people that will take your calls. And believe me, I call my senator, I call Chuck Schumer, I call Kirsten Gillibrand all the time. They're really nice to me, and they actually listen to what I have to say and write it down because I voted for them.
Right.
And they care what I think because I voted for them. That is literally the only thing that you can do that will ever make a difference in this world. That is my closing argument. How about yours?
Mine, very simply the same thing. The idea, the stakes are very clear. And if you care about a country that's going to be, and you want a country that's going to be tolerant and embracing, it's going to elevate compassion over cruelty. Because to me, the real currency of Donald Trump is cruelty. One where it's going to say that you have the same rights regardless of your religion, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation. There's only one place to go. That's to vote Democratic, and it's to get out and cast your ballot, because that sends the biggest message and hopefully moves us forward on a policy level where it sends a message to Republicans that if you have a guy like Trump again who's going to spew this open bigotry and racism, you're going to suffer so bad in electoral results that you won't do it again. You'll go back to your dog whistle stuff, which is still bad, but this has been off the chart. So this is it. Today is Judgment Day for our nation's soul, and I actually have great confidence in our fellow Americans this time. I think more than 2016, I'm actually more confident. People are really woke and they're ready to get out there. So thanks for tuning in. Get out and vote.